Welcome back to the Launch Family Podcast, where we have honest conversations about modern parenting and the support parents actually need. I'm Jessica Shelley, a former public school teacher and mom of 7, and today's guest is someone I connected with because our paths overlap in a really specific way. Teacher life, ed tech product, corporate learning, all while raising kids and navigating the constant "am I doing this right" voice that so many moms carry. Sara Norman is a former kindergarten teacher and reading specialist, has worked in product management and ed tech, and now works in enterprise learning and healthcare. She's also a mom to a 14-year-old and 11-year-old, so we'll talk a lot today about the reality of parenting in the preteen years and what it looks like to break patterns without burning out. So, Sara, welcome so much to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. I'm so excited to chat today.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so before we dive in, how's life in Minnesota? How are the kids? How's this season of motherhood that you're in right
Yeah.
now?
Yeah. Yeah. It's been an interesting season, right? Since 2026, I would say. I think, it's been interesting. Things in the world, things in our country, things in my state. I live in Minnesota. Things in my career, right? Things in my family. I think I've said a few times already, like that wasn't on my 2026 bingo card. So,
We're just
still
getting started.
navigating it. Yeah, we're just getting started. It's good, right? Two things can be true. It can be really complex in a lot of ways, and we can be really, really grateful for what we have and what's happening in our lives. So I definitely think that's kind of the season we're in is recognizing two truths can be the same at the same time and just working through that together. Yeah.
What a great reminder too. Like we can you're totally valid in whatever space that might be, that paradigm.
Mhm.
I think for me right now, we're getting ready to welcome baby number 7. By the time this airs, baby 7 will already be here. And
Yeah.
yes, you can be excited, you can also be nervous, you can also be sad. Like all of the feelings that go around in whatever season of motherhood you're in, or parenthood, I should say too, for those
Yeah.
dads. Um, that it's all valid. Like, my
Oh,
goodness, it's complicated. It's a complicated world. It's a complicated role, the most important
yeah.
job we'll ever have. Um,
100%.
and so, oh,
Yeah.
living in all of the all of the things.
Yeah. No, it doesn't often fit, right, just into one bucket. It's multiple truths at the same time, and sometimes it's not even just that easy to define. So all
Isn't
valid, right?
that?
So
Yeah.
100%,
Yeah.
100%.
Well, I want to jump into a little bit more about your career as we
Yeah.
start, just to kind of give context for our listeners. So, you started as a kindergarten teacher and a reading
Yep.
specialist. What were some of the things that you loved most about that season in your career?
Yeah. Yeah, teaching and education. I actually started in preschool before I was a kindergarten teacher too. I had a little bit that when I think about what I loved most of that season, it definitely is the people in a couple ways, right? I've had the privilege of meeting just some of the best individuals on the planet, whether it was colleagues, educators, other staff members in education, the parents, the grandparents, the families that I got to work with, the support teams that support, and most certainly the students. I've had the privilege of working with some young kiddos. I got to teach online fifth grade during the pandemic. I got to see one of my fifth grade students actually at the drive through the other day, which was a little mind blowing to me. And they're like, "Hey, wait, do I know you?" And I was like, "We do." And so the individuals and the people definitely in that aspect is what I love most. And kind of in that same breath too, the individual people, but definitely the communities that came with that too. And they're kind of two separate things for me, I think, because it was an incredible opportunity in education, as you know, Jess. There's so much community around that and kind of layers to that community. And so it really, those communities help shape me, I think, in many ways, right? In my career, I actually I don't know if we talked about this before, but when I first tried college right out of high school, I failed. I failed out my first year of college, so I moved home and I had to get a job. So I got a job at a local preschool and at a daycare, New Horizon Academy. It's a popular one in the Midwest, incredible institution, and they had a partnership with a local community college. And it was that community at New Horizon that said, "Hey, we think you should go back, try it again." I was so nervous, but they were really who encouraged me to go back and get my first degree in early childhood. And now I have 4 degrees now from that, and it has built. And actually, I'm currently in a program through Harvard Medical School through their executive education program, and looking to finish that up this summer. So it's really amazing when you reflect on kind of the stages of your life, right? And what communities can do and how they can shape who you are and kind of how that kind of brings things together, not only for me in career, but I also would say the communities really helped shape me as a parent. I had both of my kids when I was teaching, and I think the phrase is "it takes a village to raise a child," but I feel like if I'd ever write a book, it would be "it takes a village to raise a parent," because it definitely, has what I think is my story and is a big part of who I am as a mom today and as a parent, and how that's all come together. When I had my daughter, she was about 6 months old, and I was shifted, schools, right? So I was teaching kindergarten one school, and I got kind of voluntold to switch to another one, which is a big undertaking. And it was a lot. And she was 6 months old. And I was really struggling with balance. I don't even say work life balance because I think a lot of times it's just life balance for me. And that's something I still work on today. And I remember at that time I was trying to set up the new classroom, meet all these new people, figure out what's my place here while managing having a 6 month old and how do I show up in the best way possible. And my next door teaching neighbor at the time, she's an incredible educator, Jen, and she had come to me and I think it was advice she had gotten once too. And I clearly remember the day 50, almost 15 years later now, right? 14 years later. And she said, Sarah, your students will have multiple teachers in their lives, but your daughter will only have one mom, right? And that has stuck with me my entire career and really is something that I hold true and a value, I think. And so as my career has morphed and grown, right? And as I've grown as a parent, keeping that true and true to my heart and keeping that at the forefront of the decisions I make, even though I'm not in the classroom anymore, but really just remembering that has been integral, right? It's something I can still hear her voice clear as day. So if Jen ever listens to this podcast, huge shout out to her because I think it's incredible advice and one that I would share along with anyone that is, pursuing a career outside of the home. It's that balance part is hard. It is hard, and so to have people along the way, individuals and communities that have helped support me, just has been integral, and I'm so grateful for everyone on that journey during that time and since then too. So
And
yeah,
what a great like lesson or inspiration for listeners listening in. Like I'm a working mom. I had my first son as I graduated with my teaching degree.
yeah,
And so I went into my first year of teaching with a newborn and then I found out that I was pregnant when he was about 4 months old. So my oldest two are about 13 months apart and I remember that sort of like identity shift of like, oh my goodness, I spent all my day with these children that I absolutely adore and like their
yeah,
family and everything. And then at the end of the day I was like, well, what is left of me for my
yeah,
own children, right? And
yeah,
so I think that it's common too for many moms that go back to work after they have children, or even if they're staying at home, like, who am I?
yeah.
Right? And like,
Well, how does this all
where
work
are my
together?
priorities? What's actually
Mhm.
happening? Am I going to be like this forever? It's like,
Yeah.
we have so many questions.
Yeah, and
And
how do you do it, right? What's the right next step? And we all want to do right by all parts of our lives, and sometimes that's exhausting, and just to validate and for somebody to validate and to help support, along the way is so integral. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah, and
tricky.
even if
It's
you make
tricky.
the wrong step, right? Like, it's
Right.
never the end. Like, it's
No?
just a different direction, or maybe you'll be rerouted in 10 years. Like, who
Yeah,
knows? Like, this is just a season
yeah,
of life, right? So I
yeah,
love that sort of
I get
forgiveness
that.
too of yourself of like, hey, we
Yeah,
it's an important decision, but also, what will happen will be in your path anyway.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
Yeah, to
I love
release some of that. I think there's so much guilt, shame, a lot of really other great feeling words, right? That we sometimes put on ourselves or are put on us too, right? And just to honor that. How do we, like I said, I don't always know it's work life balance. Sometimes it's just balance as a parent. What does balance as a parent mean to all of us as individuals? That's always a lot to unpack for me, no matter what season I've been in. So there's always variables there to work through for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Well, and then so you started career in education and then you pivoted into project or product management and ed
Yeah.
tech. So what made you kind of take the leap to go outside of the classroom?
Yeah, hard I took a hard left. So actually my transition in my, career path happened well before it happened. So when I was teaching in a school that had a lot of students who were new to the country, so they spoke little to no English, about half of my kindergarten classroom. So they spent half the day with me, and they spent half the day with our English language teacher, Angie Koltoff, who's an incredible educator and great friend of mine. And at that time, I mean, not to date myself, but we were teaching pre like smart boards and iPads in the classroom, right? That was just kind of happening. And so she was really, I think she was doing her master's, her thesis, and some research around the support of technology and instruction, and how can that support multilanguage learners, and what does that look like, sound like, feel like? And I was so blown away by the benefits that it brought all students and the equity in our classroom space, not just multilanguage learners, but really kids come to kindergarten in various skill levels, and how do we meet them where they're at. So I fell in love with technology then. And then our district started to do a one-to-one iPad rollout. So every teacher got an iPad, and I was asked to help instruct that. And that's where I fell in love with working with adults. I really enjoyed that time, and got to connect with Angie and others. And so we held those sessions. And through that, her and I started to do different conferences together. We started to hold workshops for teachers, and really, how does education and technology come together? That started to continue to grow into being, kind of advisory or consultants for some different ed tech groups. And she actually made the switch first. She became a product manager and was working with a children's publisher. And I was doing some consultant work. And I remember I went on to get my reading specialist and degree, and my master's degree in ed leadership. And she had reached out one day and said, "Hey, we're looking for a product manager. I think you might, be a great fit." And I was like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I've never, that's a job. Like,
Right.
what job is that? Right. So much so when I sent my first letter to her director, I called it project management, which is a very different thing, and a skill set, a deep skill set that I have mad respect for, but that I don't have as much of. And so I remember when I was interviewing with somebody who became a mentor of mine, Ida, and I was going through the interview process, and it wasn't with Ida, it was with somebody else, a senior software developer there, and he said, "Look, you know the product because you used it as a teacher. You're a teacher yourself, so you know the customers, but you don't know anything about business. What are you going to do about that?" And I remember just being this like, what am I going to do about that? How am I going to figure this out? Right? I had quickly read Product Management for Dummies like before I went through the process. Like, I was like, cool. But Ida Jimenez, who's an incredible product manager, she kind of took me under her wing, and that first year was tough. I won't lie. I have a lot of transitioning teachers reach out to me through LinkedIn, always happy to help. And I try to be very honest and say that was hard. That learning curve, I like to tell people, was a straight vertical. Like, it didn't,
No curve
it
at
was tough.
all. Straight up.
Yeah. Yeah, just straight up, like, I felt like I hit a wall sometimes, like, I wasn't even driving up it, I was just standing there, and that's how I started, but I fell in love with it, partly because I had the best mentors, the best group, the community of people that I worked with then, at Capstone Publishing, the software engineers, the graphic designers, the incredible team, because it was print and digital, and I learned so much that year, and I love learning, and really had so many people to support, people that I'm still close with today, who have helped shape my career path. And so that's how I started in product management. Grateful for the people that really linked arms with me and walked me through, especially that first year. They saw something in me, I think, that I didn't, and but I've grown to find a passion for it, and it really is a fulfilling career for me now. So it's pretty cool how teaching and education and learning has always been a passion for me, and to be able to morph that into some other things like problem solving and business acumen, which I also really enjoy. So it's been an interesting journey, and I'm so grateful for every step of it. But yeah, that first step was a bit of a doozy for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and now you're in enterprise learning in healthcare,
Yeah.
and you had talked about how you were doing, like, adult learning when you were still a teacher by, like,
Yep.
doing some of those trainings and things, and now you're working with adult learners.
Yeah.
Um, and most recently, you had mentioned working on some AI learning initiatives.
Yeah.
So, what are you noticing about how adults learn new tech versus how we maybe assume that they should? Or, like, how are we
Yeah.
keeping up with, like, I guess, trends when it comes to
Yeah.
technology, or not keeping up with what we should be? Um,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question, right? I think tech integration or technology learning is something all of us, no matter where you're at, in your career pathing or in your learner journey or just kind of existing, right? What is AI? What is tech? What is happening in this world around us right now? One thing that I think is really important is that kind of that state of curiosity and pragmatic curiosity at times, right? How do we learn about the things that are around us? When I think about AI learning in particular, for me, a really integral part of that is less about what the tech can do and more about what the people can do. What is the human centric skills that come with that? What are we looking for? What do I as a human? What can I do the best? What can I offload to a tool? Right? It really in as a core AI is a tool no different than like Excel, right? So if there'll be different ways that that impacts what you do in your daily life. This just has a broader reach, and there's a lot of other things with that. Not to oversimplify it for sure, but I think what I find the most fascinating is leaning into those human centric skills. What can we say? All right, machine, you can do that part well, but I can do this better as a human, and that's where I'm going to really lean into. And how do I bring those worlds together? So that I think is the most exciting part, what it opens up for us, and where we go from there. Definitely, while still thinking about it in a very responsible, grounded, like I said, pragmatic is a word I often use way. I think it's important. Right now, there's a big hype bubble around a lot of it, and which is fine, and I get it, and we're all living in it. So it's how do we bring these worlds together? It will change things. To what extent we're all figuring out together, and that's okay. It doesn't need to be same thing, right? Doesn't need to be all one way or the other. I think both ands can be true here. So it's exciting. It's exciting to be a part of and exciting to work with people on it. I do think with AI in particular, there's a lot of fear, and so I think having pieces that very much so connect to even when I was teaching empathy, right? Understanding, curiosity, those all still come into play very much so, because at the core of what we all do, right? Learning is a risk for all of us. You're in a vulnerable space when you say, "I don't know what I'm supposed to know. Can somebody help me?" That's a very vulnerable feeling. So to be able to help support people through that is what I love the most about what I'm doing right now, which is exactly what I love the most about when I was teaching even littles and even big kids. So it's fun to see how it connects for sure.
Yeah, what a trajectory. And I think like you hit it right on the head, right? Of like we have this posture of curiosity, or should probably, when it comes to this new technology. And I think another really key point that you brought up was like the humanness of what we're doing. Like AI is a tool. It's not to replace us like in our
Yeah.
humanness. It's
Yeah.
only to further like equip us to be more human and show up in our lives, right?
Yeah.
And that's really the whole premise. I'm gonna put a plug in here, but that's like the whole
Yeah.
premise of Launch Family,
Oh,
which is
cool.
really about, how can we offload who makes the shopping list so that mom can
Yeah.
actually spend more
Yes.
time with the kids during the meal versus all of the prep that goes in. Because the meaningful part of the day is just the shared meal. It's not
Yeah.
like the shopping list and the grocery coordination and all this stuff. Like that's just the logistics to actually make the meal happen.
Yeah.
So
100%. Yeah.
selfish plug there,
Yeah.
just because it was, like, too timely for that.
No, I love it. I love it. And I could talk AI learning all day long too, and we don't need to go down those pathways. But yeah, I think utilizing
Yeah.
tools, especially and you and I have talked about this before, like decision fatigue is a very real thing for me. I struggle with it, to be honest. I still do, and you would think it would get less and less. Maybe it does. I don't know. I guess I haven't reflected on that much, but there are some days when decision fatigue is real. So if there is a tool, a person, a community, anything that can support me in that, I do want to be open to hearing about that and exploring if it is the best fit for me. It is not a one size fits all for everybody. And that I deeply respect. I'm not a like, you must do this. I think it's important that we weigh options and figure out what fits best for all of us. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely, and I think a whole heck of a lot of grace wrapped up in all of that as
Yeah.
well, like,
100%.
my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah.
And I do wanna shift, like, the conversation too, because I know, like, we're
Yeah.
talking about AI, but another really big thing is, like, social media, and, we've
Yeah.
talked about some of those vulnerabilities too of, like, the shame or the guilt or, like, our self-judgment and stuff, and so, one of the things that stood out in our initial conversation before we're recording, of course, today,
Yeah.
was really about, this Pinterest mom expectation versus reality. And especially when you're balancing multiple things, like if we're working and caregiving, and then also our needs need to be met somewhere in there as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
What has been your biggest mindset shift as your kids have gotten older? Um, and I know that you had mentioned like decision fatigue as well. Like that's another
Yeah.
big part of that. But tell
Yeah.
us a little bit more about your reality around that.
Yeah, I think I definitely struggled with that, especially when my kids were younger, right? Like I taught myself how to Photoshop to try to perfect the perfect Christmas card photo. And looking back, I don't know if I would do that again. I don't know, right? I think we all make the decisions we do in the best. But what I do question is what was my motivation for that, right? And so I think when Instagram first launched and Pinterest, and they're all great platforms, but there is this like you want to show your highlight reel, which is important, right? I think we should all share the positive things, but I also think we need to share some of the real things. And when we drive towards some of those only the things that we see and try to level up to this like Pinterest mom level, which is a term, and I have no hate on Pinterest. I think it's an incredible platform, but maybe I'm associating some things with that. It gets tricky. So I think the thing that's changed for me the most is, really reflecting on that good enough is still good sometimes, and that was hard for me. I think I like to be an achiever. I like to obviously go to school. I like to learn. I wanna continue to grow as a person, and when you're chasing that never-ending finish line, that can be just so exhausting, and especially in parenting, I think that really comes into play. Same with education. I used to tell my student teachers, "Look, there will not ever be a day when you're teaching," and I would say the same for parenting, where you'll be like, "Nailed it. Perfect. I did everything that I wanted to. I just was flawless in every phrase and word and look and conversation, and everything was perfect," right? It's really humbling, and that can be overwhelming just in of itself. And then when we layer in, different highlight reels of other people's things, it sometimes makes us feel even more distance from that in our life. So a shift for me, and I'll ebb and flow what social media platforms I'm on, because I'll recognize when it's starting to maybe hit a sore spot for me, or a pain point where I'm turning internally and doing some comparison that isn't needed. And I really owning that good enough is still good sometimes. It doesn't all have to be this elaborate thing. And what's that balance for you? And what really is your values inside, and connect with your family and what works for inside of your space, because some people love that, and I deeply respect that too, and they enjoy what they do with creation and influencing, and I think that's an incredible focus as well. If that works for you and your family, awesome, right? So just knowing where your own line is at and what good enough feels like for you, I think is something no one else can tell you. And I think we're always evolving that too. That's always changing for me as my kids grow up, trying to figure out where is that line. So, yeah.
Good enough versus good, right? Like, oh my gosh,
Right.
I'm thinking of like back to my teacher days here. But we would use like rubrics. And so it's like,
Yeah.
okay, a one is like, okay, you're just being exposed to it as something new, you're learning it. A two is like, oh, they're making
Yeah.
progress, it's becoming a little more consistent. Three, like, okay, great. Well, we're good. We've got
Yeah.
this mostly got like
Yeah.
handled or whatever. And then a four is like, oh wow, this is above and beyond, right?
Yeah.
And so I love that comparison to like sometimes good is good enough,
Yeah.
because it's so true. It's like, okay, well, you know what? My kids were fed. They had
You're
dinner
right.
tonight. It's like
Yeah.
even better is if I could throw a veggie on that plate. But honestly, like my mental capacity right now is that we got chicken nuggets from the microwave
Yeah,
today.
we got food,
We got
right?
food.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
fed. Their tummies are good. We spent some time together. Like, oh wow,
Yeah.
that's a win.
Yeah.
And I think too,
100%.
like with the social media type stuff, we see these creators that go. I think we've talked about this on another podcast episode, but we see these creators that go really far into like a niche, right? And so, oh
Mhm.
man, all of your feed is like the house cleaning videos. All of your feed is
You're
the healthy meals. And
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, they feed every single one of their meals. Like the meals are so balanced and well-rounded, and like, oh my gosh. And then I'm a horrible mom because I don't have meals like that. It's like, oh, my house
Yeah.
isn't as clean as that. And I think that the good is good enough is like such a great phrase to just keep in our back
Yeah.
pocket for that grace of like, I've got a lot going on in my life too, and I'm still taking care of my kids. I'm still showing up for my kids, and that is
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Um, And
Yeah,
so
I
I
agree.
really
Yeah.
appreciate that reminder, like,
Yeah,
for our
it is
listeners,
a great
like, of an
reminder.
encouragement, you know?
And yeah, and I think it's important to remember too, we might cycle back and forth, right? Going back to your rubric reference, some days we might be a 4. We might be a 4 for weeks or months, and then we might hit a 1 or a 2, and that's okay. I think my son is in youth sports. My daughter is in too in some activities, but my son a little bit more so. And so there are some weekends, right, where I nail packing healthy snacks and all organic, and it's homemade and it's beautiful and it's exactly what I want. And then there are times where I pack that and there's still a choice to eat the nachos at the concession stand. And then sometimes we don't even get that packed, right? So there's like that range and we can go back and forth and that's okay. And to give ourselves permission to say, all right, well, what's the most important kind of what's the bottom line for us, and that's what we'll hit. And if we've got to vary that, that's okay. What that looks like, sounds like, feels like sometimes, and to take some of that pressure off, to not always be a 4, right? That's it's still a
Yes.
4 in some ways. We just are thinking that it's not, and actually. Maybe a 4 is, yeah, your kiddo's fed, right? So what does that look like? Sound like, feel like that's the 4. It's not
For
all
sure.
of the other pieces. So yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
and, like, the seasonality too, and I'm thinking, like, child development type stuff here.
Yeah.
You got preteens, and I've
Yeah.
got littler kids right now, and we're, gearing up to have baby number 7 here in a couple weeks, but by the time this one airs, they won't be
Yeah.
here. And so
So
I
exciting.
I think that that's been my personal journey over the last couple months that, like, physically, I'm just not able to do as much as I could before, and so goodness, again, that word grace comes in and like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, like I know normally we are totally on top of this stuff. Like we homeschool our kids too, so there's some added
Yeah.
like logistical stuff that's going on just because physically I'm like, we can't go to the library. I can't corral all of you at the same time right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And so I again like what a great reminder that even the season that you're in, like there's another way. Like there it's not always
Mhm.
like you're gonna be in the season forever.
Yeah.
And so just
And
kind of recognizing that.
yeah. And I was going to say too, I think it's important. It doesn't always have to be retroactively, right? This has been a tricky week at work for a few things. And so yesterday morning, I have the privilege of driving my kiddos to school every morning. It's one of my favorite times. And I said, hey, just as a heads up, there's a lot happening today. When you get home from school, I might be stressed. I might be sad. I might be mad. I don't know what I will be feeling, but I think I'll be feeling some feelings today. And I just want to plant that seed now so that, I'll do my best to leave it at the door when they get home. I always do, but we are humans too. And I think as my kids get older, as you navigate that, it's okay to say that to them and just call it out because I think it helps to have that recognition ahead of time. Hey, we got a lot going on before this weekend. Not sure we're going to get to the grocery store, everybody. I'm going to need your help. Pitching it together, and we'll figure out what we can pull together. And I find that goes a long way, I think, especially as my kids have gotten older, that has really helped those lines of communication. It shifts, right? You can't always tell a 2-year-old that. That won't land the same way as a 14-year-old. But I enjoy being in this season and it helps me be more reflective and open and honest. And my hope is not only does it help them get a better read on what's happening, but it also helps model that for themselves. So they know it's okay to have off days, to have weeks we're not running our A game, to know there's outside factors coming into play here. That all counts and it's okay. We still need to treat each other with respect and kindness, but it's okay too if you don't want to hug it out every day kind of thing. So how we find kind of where that lands. And I think being as kiddos get older, it's great to name those things for them for sure.
Yeah, as you were describing that, I was like, "Oh my gosh, what an incredible thing to model for your kids." Like in giving them
Yeah.
that language and that like that permission to just own how they are that day or that moment or, something might be coming up that they're stressed about. I know pressure can kind of creep in as they get older
Yeah.
and high school if they're going to go to college, what does that look like? All of those
Right.
like big life decisions and questions start to come into fruition. And so
Yeah.
um yeah, giving them space, like, I oh my goodness, like,
Mhm.
what what a
Yeah.
concept, right? But also, like, wow, what a big example of just humanity, right? And how we can
Yeah.
show up for each other as well. Um,
Mhm.
one of the things that kind of is I'm noticing a shift in my house is my 10-year-old or almost 10-year-old, he isn't so keen on mom. He's more into his friends a little bit. Like I've
Yeah.
got a bunch of little kiddos still that are very much like, "Oh, mom's my best friend." But how have you kind of seen a shift in like quality time? Because I know that's something that a lot of moms really value is just the time that they get with their kids and the quality
Yeah.
of the time that they actually have. As you mentioned, like one of the highlights of your day is that dropping your
Yeah.
children off at school.
Yeah.
So how has that kind of shifted or looked differently as your kids have approached preteens and teens?
Yeah, it really does shift. I think that's where in when you do hindsight, you can really see, the shifts that happen. I'm fortunate to have an incredible group of women as friends and who have children at different stages, right? That aren't, aligned. So some are ahead and some have littlers. And I think it's wonderful when you can bring kind of those diverse perspectives because it helps you as you're working through some of that and to have people also help articulate guide, just listen, be there to connect with. And I think for me, one of the biggest pieces, and I've seen viral videos where like people try to hold their babies now as teenagers, right? Because you don't remember the last time you held them. And I always cry because I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know
Oh,
when was the last time we snuggled like that, like it's just, it's always a thing. But I think learning to find joy in those shifts, right? I think it's really helpful to step outside to make sure I'm regulated, right? Am I looking for connection? Do I want some time? How do I state that? How do I ask for that? Because what I find often with kind of preteen and teens, I'll be like, "Hey, do you guys want to play a game?" They're like, "No, we're good." Like, "Oh,
oh.
okay." And then I'll be a little like, "Do you wanna watch a movie?" And they'll be like, "No, we're good." And it's hard because I'm searching out for connection. So how do we phrase that? And how would you recognize they're not always wanting to spend time with you? That's just not where their frame of mind is. And it's okay if it doesn't match up when yours is. It's okay. And I try to still honor their space because that's what they're doing, right? Like as they grow, they're hitting those stages where they're working to become more independent. That's what their brains are doing, and they're figuring this out, and that's a sign of healthy growth. But that doesn't mean it isn't hard on our parents' hearts, on our mama's hearts, and dad's hearts, and grandparents' hearts, right? And so, how do we do that? One thing that's really helped me in phrasing that is I almost think of it, I reverted back to like toddlerhood when it's parallel play. When you have toddlers and they don't often
Yes.
play together, that 2 to 3 year old stage, they'll sit next to each other in the sandbox, but they're not really interacting. I feel like we're kind of leaning into that sometimes in my household. I'll have and a great example of this. My daughter and I went on a trip together this fall, and I think I had high Pinterest dreams of braiding each other's hair and painting nails and spilling all of our secrets and eating cookie dough until, 3 a.m. or whatever it was, right? Now to be fair, we don't do that at home all the time. So why I was like, had this like grandiose Hallmark vision of an experience. And that wasn't how it landed. Shouldn't surprise anyone, right? But it's a really great example of that because I realized then just sitting next to her, we both would be reading or we'd be sitting at the beach together. That is still quality time. And she's viewing it as quality time. And she knows that I'm there. And sometimes that's the very best quality time. It's maybe not an interaction, and so I might still be searching for interactions, or I might be reminiscing of the ways things used to be, and that's a valid feeling too. Nostalgia is a big feeling in a parent heart. But she's not being disrespectful, she's not being mean, she's not blowing me off, right? And if I'm dysregulated, if I'm having a hard time, it's easy to read that as that. So, really embracing this concept of parallel play, if you will, isn't what it is, and I'm sure they would be cringing if that's what they knew I was thinking, and so we'll see how that lands, but that's how I frame it in my head. I'm like, "Okay, they just
Yeah.
wanna do their own thing, but that doesn't mean I can't do my own thing, and that's offered up a time now in this season. You don't get that sometimes. I struggled with that when my kids were younger. What hobbies do I have? Hobbies? I'm a mom. I don't do I have hobbies? Like, I just right?
Right.
And remembering that part, and so while it is hard for me because I do miss the cuddles and some of those pieces, it's offering me an opportunity to. Again, both things can be true. And how do we find a space where we can come together that it meets everyone's needs? They are humans and they want their own space and time too. And as they get older, they're going to continue to want that. So how do we bridge that? Um, Yeah, so yeah, it's an interesting concept and one I would love to I should look into it more and research because 'cause I'm kinda just out here winging it, but I really found that on the vacation, like, "Okay, this is cool, we're cool, I can do this." There's a quote out there, I think you and I talked about it, it's actually Jack Black, and he says, "Don't try to make a happy kid happier," and I
Yeah.
think that's a really powerful phrase, one that I really find as my kids are getting older, like, they're good, so I don't need to layer in Battleship and Candyland and, whatever activities that I seem to think might make this better. I can offer it, and we should schedule those times too, but also if they're good, it's okay to say, "Okay, you're good. Awesome. I'm gonna figure out what to do with myself." So, yeah, how do we balance that? It's definitely an interesting season for sure.
I love that, and it's like I'm like all ears right now because my kids are like just getting to that stage where it's like,
Yeah.
okay, we're gonna start seeing this. So I appreciate it as a mom of like,
Yeah.
okay, tell me all of your ways. Um,
And they're
but
not others. Like I said, I've been blessed to have so many incredible people and women that really do that. And I have to say, we have a grandma Marie does an incredible job of that, even with us as adults, right? She's a rock in our family, and it just is this calm, grounding presence. And it's like that's the kind of mom I do want to be for my kids when they get older, right? Because there are the different phases. And when our kids are adults, what does parenting look like? I think that's something many people work through. And so, how do we build those habits? How do we get to there? If that's what I want to do, then in 5, 10 years, what would that look like, sound like, feel like now? And it's not always that meta or that easy, but there's little things that we can start to do both on ourselves and within our family to help drive us to that point. So
yeah, that's a great perspective to have too of like how the moments that you have right now while they're still under your roof, like how is that actually laying the foundation for what your adult relationship will be like with your children?
yeah,
We've talked about that on a couple other podcasts too. So I would encourage listeners to
yeah,
like find those episodes because it really is that perspective, right? Of we're training up our kids to be independent. And
yeah,
so developmentally, like that's my background is child development. And I'm like, yep, okay, well, I know that this is coming. I know that this is gonna start to pull
yeah,
away and it's gonna start to hurt a little bit. But
yeah,
it's normal. And like I'm so grateful that they
yeah,
are in that stage of, hey, I'm exploring and becoming my own person and
yeah.
all of those things. So was there any other like tips, nuggets, stories,
Oh, yeah.
anything else that you want to share with parents that are listening into this episode today?
You know, I think when I think about you're right. We're all our own people, which I know sounds silly to say, but when I was a new mom, I struggled with like I'm an introvert at heart. I've got a solid dose of social anxiety in me, and I wasn't sure where to go and what to do with some of it. I had kind of a complex upbringing, and it's okay. It's okay to not have everything mapped out to perfection. And it's okay to be who you are and know who you are. I think for me, the number one thing that's helped me is just identifying that in myself and making sure I stay regulated with my emotions and feelings and knowing I won't always be all the time. Because again, we're humans. And how do we model that for our kids? I think is incredibly helpful. And then also always just knowing you don't need to do it alone. It's okay to reach out to others. I think I've mentioned a few times here the communities that I've had the privilege to be a part of, and that's not my natural instinct. Again, I'm an introvert. I love to close the door and read a book and stay home alone. And so
Right.
but that no one does, right? There's help out there, right? Even if it's, like, through medical places or, others or communities of people, and I just encourage, others to continue to reach out and connect. Great podcasts like yours that just helps normalize things because when we don't have the opportunity to connect with others, sometimes they start to swirl and then that gets scary and hard to deal with on your own. So I'm so grateful for all the people in my life, both career and parenthood that have helped me along this journey. And I would continue to encourage others to reach out and find those people too, because they are there. It might just be for a season, right? Or they might be in for the long haul. But there are great communities here to support everyone on this journey, and you don't have to do it alone. So I think I think that's probably my biggest learning for me as a parent, and as a career person, both, I would say that you don't have to do it alone, and it's okay to reach out and say to somebody, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help? And most people are almost always willing and open arms, but taking that first step is hard sometimes. So
For
Yeah.
sure. No, definitely. I feel like the common thread in all of the aspects and the stories that you had shared with us today. So, Sarah, I just want to thank
Good.
you for sharing what real
Yeah.
motherhood looks like when you're
Thank
raising big
you.
kids and building a career and actively trying to do things differently than how you were raised. One of the
Yeah.
big that I'm taking from this is that parenting isn't about perfection, right? Like it's
Yeah.
more about that awareness as your starting point.
Yeah.
It's noticing your
100%.
default, pausing long enough to choose a better response, and then repairing when you don't. And I
Yeah.
think we've all been there.
Yes.
um,
Yeah, such a key part for
yeah.
sure.
And
Yeah.
then for moms who are listening who feel like she's constantly grading herself, right? Like we all have that kind of like assessment happening within about dinner and emotions, routine,
Yeah.
work, patience.
Yeah.
Let this be a reminder that you don't need to be the Pinterest perfect
Yeah.
mom to be a good mom. Your kids don't need a flawless rubric, right? They need a
Yes.
real
100%.
willing to show up, keep learning, and keep coming back for that connection. To
Yeah.
our listeners, we'll be sure to link ways to connect with Sarah in the show notes. And if you're listening and this episode gave you some language for something that you've been feeling, share it with a friend who's in the same season.
Yeah.
Share with someone
Definitely.
who's coming up on a season or that just came out of a season, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes
Mhm.
the most powerful support is simply hearing me too. So make
Yes.
sure that you're
Oh,
subscribed to the Launch
beautiful.
Family podcast, and we will see you next week.